Species. Unite.
I used to be the largest dairy consumer on the planet. I mean, I used to eat so much dairy and meat. The more that I looked into the dairy industry, the more that I saw that it was the singular most inhumane industry on the planet, that we've all been lied to, including myself, for years. I always believed that the picture on the milk carton, the cow sitting next, standing next to her calf in the green field with the red barn in the back was true. And it's certainly the complete opposite.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. This conversation is with Richard Kudo, aka Couto, the founder of Animal Recovery Mission, or ARM, an investigative organization that exposes some of the most egregious cases of animal cruelty in the U.S. ARM has led high-risk undercover operations that have resulted in the shutdown of illegal slaughterhouses, animal fighting rings, and horse meat trafficking networks. Recently, they released a damning investigation into 2 industrial dairy farms supplying milk to Coca-Cola's Fairlife brand. What they uncovered was systematic animal abuse, environmental violations, and a devastating betrayal of consumer trust. While Fairlife markets its products as being sourced humanely, ARM's footage tells a very different story, one of suffering, abuse, and corporate complicity. Despite the evidence, this story has been largely ignored by mainstream media, likely due to Coca-Cola's massive influence and advertising dollars. Just a warning, this conversation is disturbing, but it's important and it's necessary. It's really good to have you here. So thank you, Kudo.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Will you just say a little bit about who you are and who ARM is, and then we'll get into it?
I first started this in about 2007 when I was basically a volunteer and soon became a board member with the SPCA. It was a local horse rescue in Miami. And I went out when I was volunteering one day. I was actually a real estate developer by trade in South Beach in Miami. So I would build my buildings and I would go out to the SPCA and volunteer and help the animals. Basically I was cleaning stalls, and I did it because I loved it and I loved the animals. And then I went out to assist an investigator on a call with the Miami Police Department. And it was a call to an illegal slaughterhouse, which I didn't really know that existed. Certainly not in Miami, 15 minutes from South Beach, one of the more famous areas on the planet, right? And there were thousands of animals. They were in disarray. There were some of the horses were lying in the mud. They couldn't walk. They had broken legs. And one of the horses there was actually grandson of Secretariat. He was one of the more famous racehorses in the United States, and he broke his leg at the Florida Derby. And his value went from the millions to basically zero, and he was sold for $50 to this illegal slaughterhouse for meat. I didn't know at the time that horse meat was very, very popular in the state of Florida, especially in Miami. Long story short, we rescued that horse that day, but it opened my eyes to a very violent underground horse meat trade in Miami and in the state of Florida that no one was addressing. And my own organization, the SPCA, wasn't addressing it because of the danger surrounding it. And it was run by the Cuban mafia. It was a multi-million-dollar industry, and I started to tackle it when I was a real estate developer, and I started to investigate it in the middle of the night, and I started infiltrating all these properties in the middle of the night to basically build case files for law enforcement to close these places because no one wanted to touch them, law enforcement-wise, because of the danger surrounding the industry because of the Cuban mafia. Even the police and 3-letter agencies in the United States wanted to stay away from it. So the investigation led to actually the largest raid in history of the United States on animal cruelty issues. And it was actually the number one largest tactical raid in history of the state of Florida for any reason. That year, we closed 75 illegal slaughterhouses. over 20 illegal animal fighting rings, ritualistic properties where they were torturing animals for religions. And the area was called the C9 Basin, which laid in the wetland area of the Florida Everglades. Fundamentally and ecologically fragile lands we're talking about here that were being filled in to create dry areas for farm animals. So we forced the landowners to tear down over 800 buildings and restore that entire geographical area back to the Florida Everglades, what it once was. And then I created the Animal Recovery Mission from there. And basically we did and are doing now anything and everything that other animal organizations will not do because of the danger surrounding certain topics. Over 15 years later, we're in about 6 different countries. We have full-time teams in Kathmandu, in Nepal, in Dhaka, Bangladesh. We have teams in Juarez, Mexico, and other countries in India. And of course, we're in the multitude of states in the US, tackling a multitude of issues.
In places like Bangladesh, what are your teams doing there?
With those, we're going undercover in large-scale festivals. A lot of Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists have animal sacrifice festivals where they're torturing and killing millions of animals in front of us per festival. So we're showing that basically to the world for the first time in many cases. And we're also underground in animal wildlife trades. And whether it be big cats, we do a lot of elephant work in Nepal and in India. These are elephants that are basically being trained to carry Westerners on their backs down the street for joyrides, right? And a lot of illegal animal torture goes into that training for those elephants, because I can assure you an elephant doesn't want to walk down a crowded, busy street, certainly not with 3 people on their backs. So it takes a lot of violence to create that elephant to have the patience for that industry. It's pretty brutal. So we work with different militaries, different police forces, as well as just education globally to show people, well, maybe you shouldn't take that elephant ride because this is what's going on behind the scenes.
Right. And then go back to the horses for a second. I never knew, until I learned from you guys years ago that we had any kind of horse slaughter happening in the United States, for years since it's been illegal. But I didn't know there was this entire illegal underground going on. Where were the horses coming from, or where are they coming from when it still happens?
A lot of these horses are coming from local racetracks. These are athletes, just like Freedom's Flight, the first animal that I rescued in the C9 Basin back in the day. So they have that connection with local racetracks. They're getting them from Craigslist, Facebook marketplace ads, people that are giving the horses away for free, thinking they're going to good homes. The killers are also getting them from auction. Listen, you can buy a horse right now at auction for $5 or $10. That the meat from that animal in the state of Florida and now beyond throughout the United States, because it is gaining speed. These guys are making between $15,000 and $20,000 per horse. So the return on our investment is huge here. But is it easier at times for these people to break into your private home, to your barn in the middle of the night and harvest the meat from your pet horse? Sure is. So that's what's happening as well, too. And that's happening hundreds of times per year. Many of these crimes go unreported because people just don't want law enforcement. They don't trust law enforcement to come onto their property for whatever reason. And so most are unreported. But it's why the armed operative goes deep, deep undercover in the horse meat trade, because no one else is. We went undercover recently in a county in the state of Florida called Hernando County. And the sheriff's office, law enforcement, were actually somewhat tied to the horse slaughter operation. And it was called Operation Barker. It's on our website for people to look at that. And for the first time, we get on video a championship thoroughbred racehorse that raced many, 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 many races in the US that was butchered alive on film. And they wouldn't even take that charge. They didn't close this place down. It was actually the local people that surrounded the farm with picket signs that closed it themselves. So it just shows you these operations have been let grow because of a sheer lack of enforcement, even when the police know about it.
Is that elsewhere other than Florida as well?
We're seeing it in a few other states now. We're seeing it in Utah. We're seeing it in Texas. We're seeing it in California. So this is spreading, but you need to understand why this meat is being eaten is that many Cuban American nationals are eating the meat because they think that it is a medical elixir. They think that it is a cure-all for certain ailments, that it cures side effects from chemotherapy. It cures blood disorders. Many Cuban males are eating it for the libido, if you can believe that. They think that it's stronger than Viagra if they eat a piece of horse steak. That's why it is so in demand, and these people are so desperate to get their hands on it because they think that it's a cure-all. They're not eating it because it's good meat. The horse meat is going also between $7 and $40 per pound. So this isn't cheap meat. The customers are really paying out to get this stuff. These aren't poor peasants that are eating this meat.
And I've seen some of your videos and photos throughout the years of how these horses are slaughtered. And it is so beyond brutal.
Yeah.
And so hard to look at. And I always thought when I first learned about you and ARM a long time ago, I always thought you guys are the complete badasses of the animal world. You go places no one else ever goes.
Yeah. And that's for a reason. I didn't stop my for-profit career. I was making a lot of money in real estate development, but I wanted to do something more ethical, right? But I also didn't want to just start an animal rescue and do something is already being done. I wanted to do something special that would have a greater effect. And I think that we've been successful over the years.
I didn't know that you also went until this year into big industrial farming as well. And you just had an investigation that was released in February on dairy. Will you talk about that?
The dairy industry is something that we started to look into in 2015. I used to be the largest dairy consumer on the planet. I mean, I used to eat so much dairy and meat. The more that I looked into the dairy industry, the more that I saw that it was the singular most inhumane industry on the planet, that we've all been lied to, including myself, for years. I always believed that the picture on the milk carton, the cow sitting next, standing next to her calf in the green field with the red barn in the back was true. And it's certainly the complete opposite. We went undercover recently at Coca-Cola's owned Fairlife milk. And we went undercover in 2 independent dairies right outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And our operatives worked there as workers. They were legally hired and videoed covertly with hidden underground cameras of the ongoings in those operations. And that was actually our 7th and 8th investigation on Fairlife milk and Coca-Cola since 2019. And we wanted to show basically the world that even from the changes that were made to better things for the animals, which Coca-Cola and Fairlife milk had to do after our 2019 investigation on them in Indiana, legally, it was a court order that they had to put certain stipulations in place to better the lives, which they did. All those stipulations were actually put in place in Arizona.
Like what kind of stipulations?
Well, they were hit with a class action lawsuit. They had to pay $21 million because they were lying, telling people that their animals were loved and cared for, right? And they certainly weren't. Nor did Coca-Cola care about the dairy cows that were, producing the milk for them, for their label, Fairlife milk. They had to put cameras up where there were human-animal interaction. They had training. They had to have new training. They had to have certain protocols for veterinarians in every location. There was an oversight committee, an animal welfare oversight committee that was put together by Coca-Cola and audit companies. So these audit companies would go in unannounced and do unannounced audits throughout all of their supplying dairy farms to ensure that the cows were being treated properly, right? Well, right when we were hired in both of these operations in Arizona, we saw the felony animal cruelty in the first 5 minutes of us working there. The first 5 minutes. So after working there for 3 months, and we were driving tractors way out in the fields. We barely even saw cows unless we came in for breaks and for our lunch hour. And we had over 19 hours of misdemeanor or felony animal cruelty from edited clips that we put together, and it came together almost 20 hours that we had to submit to law enforcement. Law enforcement didn't believe it. We had to physically show them that, yes, this was all from this farm that they now know. They have this case now. Are they going to make arrests or not? We're not certain. They're dragging their feet right now. How closely tied is the state of Arizona and the federal government to Fairlife milk and Coca-Cola? Let's remember that Coca-Cola is the 6th largest brand in the world. And I think we all know out there that corporate, at least in America, run our country. Who do they own? Our politicians. They own those local sheriffs. They own all the decision makers, the people, quote unquote, with the power in our country. So they're getting away with a whole lot. And this investigation in Arizona didn't even make it to the local news, the local ABC, CBS, Fox Newses, because they threatened those news stations with pulling their advertising budgets from those news stations. In other words, you air this and you're going to be out possibly millions of dollars. They control the media as well, right? Which is why podcasts such as this is so important, to get this out to the people so they know and understand how and where to spend their money. And I can tell you right now, if you're milk drinkers, Fairlife milk is not it.
So let's go back to the investigation. So you're doing 2 investigations, both outside Phoenix. Was there a reason that you chose these 2 dairy farms, or was it random?
We looked at about 10 different Fairlife farms that we thought we could get jobs at. So it was at random. There were no reports of abuse that came onto our office. Where we get hired is where we get hired, right? The second farm is a little bit different, case number 2, because the newborn dairy calves that were being born every single day were being ripped from their mothers, because all dairy calves are in the dairy industry. Because why? That milk coming from that mother isn't for the baby to drink, it's for us, right? So what do you do with the baby? They're being transported to another property. We wanted to find out where those babies were going, and we found out that it was another dairy farm supplying to Fairlife that were housing all of the dairies for about 5 different Fairlife supplying dairy farms in that area. And we went into one barn, and there were over 5,000 newborn babies in one barn, if you can believe it. All of them were sitting in veal crates, which are illegal in the state of Arizona. Each veal crate is a misdemeanor charge on the owners of the dairy and, guess what, Coca-Cola executives as well. So we're demanding right now that Coca-Cola executives be charged with over 5,000 misdemeanor crimes. How do we know that Coca-Cola knew about the veal crates where all these calves were dying in? They couldn't even move. Well, because their audit companies were going in and auditing that farm and delivering written reports to Coca-Cola. So there you go, Coca-Cola. You just shot yourself in the foot by having those locations audited.
I think for a lot of people, if they were to go to a dairy farm, an industrial dairy, any dairy farm, actually, a lot of the things they would see that are legal, they would think would qualify as animal cruelty, right?
100%.
And so will you talk about what you saw and what was illegal versus just all the egregious things that happen legally on these farms?
Well, the illegal part, the dairy cows that were in labor, that were laying down in the milking area, in labor, the workers didn't want them there, and the head managers didn't want them there, so they would wrap chains around their necks, drag them 1,000 feet with a tractor, with a noose-like chain around their neck, and then hoist them by the head and neck over an 8-foot wall, drag them another 10,000 feet with a tractor, and then beat them until they stood up. And if they didn't stand up, they would shoot them in the back of the neck. And that still wouldn't kill them, right? They weren't even being shot properly. Babies that wouldn't eat were purposely being starved, and they would suffer for days. Babies that were in the veal crates would get stuck in these awkward positions because the cages were so small. No one would free them except the armed undercover worker while they were working there. If they didn't free them, they would sit in these awkward positions for days and die. Dairy cows and newborn babies were being beaten with metal pipes, with rebar, with bats. They were being stabbed with knives. They were being stabbed with screwdrivers. Just utter beatings constantly all day long. And as far as the things that are legal throughout the industry, well, just purposely impregnating an animal in the United States and ripping that baby from that mother the moment that they're birthed is, in my eyes, animal cruelty. In any state in the US, if your dog or cat gives birth and you pull those puppies or kitties from that mother right away, those are misdemeanor crimes. But it's not for a calf or a cow because there's money wrapped around that. Hoisting these cows that are quote unquote downer cows that can't walk with these metal clamp systems that they put onto their bones, they hoist them with tractors. Just getting a mother that just gave birth into the milking area, those mothers had to be whipped and beaten with chains, with ropes, and with these straps that the Coca-Cola supplying dairy farm head managers were handing out to workers to beat them so that they would go into the milking stalls, because I can assure everyone, cows do not want to go in and be milked with machines. All they want is to be with their babies. And we know that because they're charging after all these workers to get to their babies when they're being ripped from them. They're screaming for weeks on end, looking for their babies. And that's throughout the dairy industry. It's not just Fairlife. It is the entire dairy industry, which is why I no longer drink milk. I drink oat milk. I drink almond milk. Dairy was the easiest product for me to switch to plant-based out of meat and eggs and everything else. Dairy was the easiest. And it was the healthiest as well. I'm an ex-athlete, right? So I know how much inflammation comes to the human body from dairy products. I've always known how bad they are. It just took that little nudge for me to X out all of that. But it took me to understand how cruel the dairy industry was to make that choice.
A lot of people say to me, wow, I gave up dairy and I feel so much better. And of course you do. You're not a cow. So how long do you stay undercover on these farms? And how do you know when you have enough footage?
Yeah, usually our time limit, let's say we're there for 3 months, right? If it's that violent and we need to take the cases to law enforcement sooner than later, then we will stop the investigation, whether it could be weeks or it could be months, depending. But what we want to do is we want to show out of each investigation, each dairy farm where we're undercover, the entirety of the dairies. So the dairy farms are really run like the military. They're very compartmentalized. And if you don't work in one area, you don't go to the other area. So if you work in the calf area, you don't go into the milking area. Well, we do. We are trained to make sure we get into every division of that dairy, no matter what. So we'll make friends with everyone. And we'll have multiple jobs, which is why we're usually there for 3 months, right? We want to show everyone that there's abuse throughout every division of that particular dairy where we're undercover. And we won't quit until we have all of those findings from each area.
And are there multiple of you, like multiple investigators on one farm at a time, or is it just one?
No, we have one operative per location. If we do know that, let's say, Fairlife is harvesting dairy from a multitude of dairies in one location, we may or may not send a multitude of investigators at one time or spread out so we can show that it's not just one farm. It's not just one supplying Fairlife Coca-Cola farm in that area. It's a multitude of them that are all being run independently, but the cruelty is almost identical. We want to show that it doesn't matter which dairy farm or Fairlife or Coca-Cola farm we go undercover in, we're going to find abuse wherever we go in any of their locations. Why? Why do we 100% know? Because it's the dairy industry. And Coca-Cola knew this before getting into the dairy industry, before purchasing Fairlife milk. Let's remember that Coca-Cola didn't purchase the entirety of Fairlife milk until, I believe, 2020. After our investigation, where they were part owners of Fairlife in 2019. So they knew the realities, but what did Coca-Cola see? Dollar signs. And now they're building plants globally. India, China, Canada, all over the United States. So they are ready to take over the liquid milk world. And if that means getting into the worst animal torture operation industry globally. They're ready to do that, again, for money.
And not only is it horrific animal torture, it's also massive environmental damage, these dairy farms.
Huge. Dairy farms are the single worst environmental disaster zones in the world. If you look at it environmentally, the dairy industry is the worst. Human health, the dairy industry, consuming dairy is the worst possible product you could consume. Dairy farms are the leading number one animal cruelty torture chambers for animals in the world. So right there, if you X out dairy completely, and I'm not just talking about milk, I'm talking about the yogurts and the butters, and the mayonnaises, the ranch dressings, anything with dairy in it, right? Cream for your coffee. All of these also have plant-based companies that have come in and made a tastier product, and they're better for you, right? So you're hitting, a multitude of industries with one stone by Xing out dairy. The number one thing you could do in this world for the environment, for your own health, and for animals is to stop consuming dairy. Because let's remember, the dairy industry exists. Coca-Cola and Fairlife milk exist only because we are purchasing the product.
So now you have like 20 hours of edited footage, meaning like 20 hours of just straight cruelty and straight egregiousness. What's the process with the footage once you have it ready to go?
Once we know that we have a very strong case, we have the investigator quit. He comes to our main compound, which is in Florida. We have a very large training compound in the state. It's an undisclosed location. It's where everyone is trained, and it's where everyone is also decompressed. We go over the footage. We create a sample video, which is usually about 3 minutes long. We also create a report that's about 150 pages, very, very detailed. Many of our investigators are ex-law enforcement, ex-special forces, and we're also regular civilians. The people that actually just took down Coca-Cola and went into the Arizona farms were civilians. But they were trained very, very well at our compound. So once that report and once that video was created, then we send it to law enforcement. But more important than arrests in these cases are educating the public is our number one goal. It's showing the public what the dairy industry is. It's showing the public who Coca-Cola and what they've become for money, and who Fairlife, that cute little smiling cow on their label that says Fairlife above it, which by the way is supposed to be Fairlife for that cow, that's the meaning, isn't a Fairlife at all. And no one would know about this if it wasn't for the undercover investigator. It's how incredibly important that individual is. If we see arrests come from that case, like we're waiting for right now in Arizona, then great. But more than that, and more importantly than that, we want people to be educated to make their own choice on, should I continue to purchase dairy?
Yeah.
How should I spend my money?
Absolutely. And when there are arrests, are the arrests typically the workers?
Yeah, we're demanding right now that the head managers and the owners, as well as Coca-Cola executives, be arrested, because that's who's really responsible here. It's not the bottom tier worker. The bottom tier worker that's coming in and are being trained by the top managers how to torture these animals. They're being trained that. And we showed that on video in Arizona. I'll tell you right now, I've been doing this for 18 years. I could care less and do not want the bottom tier low-level worker arrested anymore. It does nothing. Blaming something like that on that one person so quote-unquote things can go back to normal on that farm and people can continue to drink Fairlife with a clear conscience, not going to happen.
Good.
We actually went undercover. We went undercover in Windy Ridge Dairy that was supplying Fairlife in 2019. And after all the protocols, we wanted to find out if that same location had gotten better in Indiana. So we went undercover again in 2023. Same farm, still supplying Fairlife. We followed the trucks to the Fairlife plant. When we went public, Coca-Cola, number one, lied and said that they weren't taking milk from that location. But they also at the time didn't know that I personally followed the trucks. The cruelty at that farm was worse in 2023 than in 2019. After they found out, 2 days later, after our press conference, that we followed the trucks, They actually admitted, and they knew what trucks that I followed. Yes, actually, we did take milk from there, but it was just on the days that Kudo followed the trucks.
Oh my God.
Those were the only days. And they're expecting the greater public to be dumb enough to believe that. But they're liars, right? And we've shown that time and time again, specifically in that case, which is now why they're seeing up to 4 different lawsuits that had just been filed stemming from the 2023 case and now the 2025 case in Arizona. So a brand new class action lawsuit has just been filed, along with consumer fraud lawsuits, environmental lawsuits. In the Arizona farms, the dead babies and hundreds of dead babies would die on a weekly basis. They were throwing them in open fields on the outskirts of the farm on and near state trust land where people hiked and camped, recreational land. And you would go out there and there were thousands of dead baby calves. They were also pumping sludge runoff waste from the dairy into environmentally friendly areas where wildlife were nesting. So we have that on film as well. Coca-Cola's in trouble right now. So they've tried to defer the new lawsuits for another 60 days to get their corporate attorneys to be able to prepare for these. But they're in big trouble. And not a lot of people know about these lawsuits because the greater press aren't reporting on it because of their marketing relationship with Coke.
This stuff we know happens on every dairy farm on the planet. It's just, like you said, one of the cruelest industry there is. But people should know about Coca-Cola's dairy farms. Absolutely. And it's actually irresponsible as can be of the press to not report on it.
It really is. Yeah. But, again, it shows how closely tied the press are to big business. And they'll lie or not report on something to protect their advertisers from money.
It doesn't feel like it today, but I think there will be an end to dairy in general at some point.
I agree. And here's something that's interesting. We took this class action lawsuit to one of the bigger firms, I believe in Mississippi, that actually the same firm that took on Big Tobacco years ago. And the head owner of that firm looked at this case and sat back in his chair and he said, "This is the next Big Tobacco." So I believe that in the future, I don't know if it's going to be near or far, but big dairy is going to be very similar to big tobacco. And once the figures are put together and it hits Congress and there are going to be the hearings and everything else, and they're going to say, who's responsible? Well, you're responsible. Congress is responsible. Everyone's responsible, right? They're going to try to play the blame game. But I do believe that the dairy industry is going to end. It's just when.
And until then, you have to keep doing these investigations.
I said it in our press conference to Coca-Cola. I'm going to keep investigating them. I'm going to go throughout the world, and wherever they open an operation, I'm going to investigate them. And they can't keep me out because ARM has their number. We know how to get undercover in their company. Coca-Cola now knows they have the inability to keep the animal recovery mission out of their supplying dairy farms. And I'm sure they're scared to death. And they should be. Because do we have another case right around the corner? We may. You may hear about it very, very, very soon.
I hope we do. I absolutely do. And so at the same time, are you still doing investigations into illegal farms and slaughterhouses?
We certainly are, yeah. Right now, we're undercover in a multitude of industries, from illegal slaughterhouses, illegal horse slaughter. We go undercover, and we're known for tackling the largest animal fighting operations in the world. Many of those are in Miami. We are the number one organization globally that goes into ritualistic properties, torturing animals for different religions. We are unfortunately undercover in the bestiality trade in the United States, and there's a very large industry for that.
I had no idea.
We deal with wildlife, we deal with domestic pet issues. We'll basically deal and take on anything that we know we can make a difference in.
And so you also have a sanctuary. That must be a really good place to go after these jobs.
You're really right. We started Armed Sanctuary back in 2015, almost by accident, because after we make arrests with law enforcement in illegal slaughterhouses, whatever animals were there, we would always rescue. And at times there were thousands of animals there. So we were filling up the sanctuaries throughout the United States. And we didn't have a property of our own to take the sicker animals to. The Department of Agriculture in Florida would actually seize the sick animals from us and take them to slaughterhouses and kill them for meat. And these were pigs with swine flu, with brucellosis, with contagious diseases. But that wasn't the issue. It was, we're not going to risk our butts for state departments to seize these animals and take them to other slaughterhouses. What sense does that make? So we created Armed Sanctuary. We now have the largest animal sanctuary in the state of Florida, one of the largest in the United States. We're not open to the public. All our animals come from our investigations. So they never leave. We never adopt them out. We certainly don't sell them. The only way out of this property is for that animal to, get to that rainbow bridge. They're never leaving our gates. And it's not just a sanctuary for the animal, it's a sanctuary for the investigator. So now when the investigators are trained here, so they're out working with our animals as we speak. To my right, a couple hundred feet from me, I have two investigators that are training for getting into a dairy and an illegal slaughterhouse. And where are they working? With our cows, with our rescued dairy cows. When they come in from an investigation, instead of spending all that money on psychiatrists and that sort of thing, they are given a little bit of time off, and then they go out into the fields and work with our animals. And now they're starting the decompression of their operation, and they're getting their minds and their bodies back. Many of these guys and girls are PTSD positive, right? But still, we're working with their minds to create happiness again. And it works.
I've never heard of anybody doing that, like having a sanctuary of the animals you save, that it's so circular and so beautiful on every level.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that came from me knowing what the undercover investigator goes through, because I'm still undercover. I know what these people go through. So going home and sitting on a couch and giving a month off isn't doing it. But coming here and helping the animals, and they're also helping themselves. After 3 months, number one, they've seen what their sacrifice working undercover does, right? They see the changes that it makes. And after they're decompressed, they come up to me and say, Kudo, let's go. Let's get it on. Where are we going? And now my turnover rate has been cut in half at least. And the good that we're doing now, because of the animal sanctuary here in Florida, is just, it's incredible. So it's a very unique situation that we have.
And how many animals are there?
We have about 600 animals right now.
Amazing.
It ranges from dogs and cats to every farm animal that you could think of, and some wildlife as well. It's just a very incredible Zen-like place, and it's certainly open to you. It's a black site because, remember, we do take part in many arrests of real bad apples out there, and when they get out of prison, they're looking for us. So all of our sites are undisclosed, certainly our large compound and sanctuary. It's secretive for obvious reasons.
And have you had problems with that, like people coming after you or people coming after your investigators?
We've had a lot of problems, people coming after me and our investigators. Yeah, we've actually raided illegal slaughterhouses, and SWAT team members have found thick files on me, myself, with a bounty on my head, as well as some of our other investigators. When people are arrested in the state of Florida, they've come forward and said, listen, if you give me a little bit of time off, I have some information. Some of that information is on this organization that's illegal, that's going undercover in these horse slaughter operations. A lot of people want these people dead. That's how we know of the bounties on our heads and the types of people that are after us. That comes from law enforcement and the state attorney's office basically sitting us down and giving us that information, which is why our sites are black sites, and we have to take a little bit of extra precaution that most animal defense organizations and animal rescues don't have to consider.
It's incredible, Kudo. You're doing the hardest of the hard work, and so appreciated. And thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for all of these investigations.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, this is a huge part of what we do. It's getting our information and our findings out to the public, which is exactly what you're doing right now. It's so incredibly important. So I thank you for that.
To learn more about Kudo and to learn more about ARM, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you'd like to do us a favor, we'd greatly appreciate it. Please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knutson, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polky-Link, Bethany Jones, Hannah Gabrielson, and Anna Kolner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.